Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the podcast. It's my pleasure to really get somebody on here that I've wanted to interview the last couple of years, and he was gracious enough with his time to join us here in the studio. One of the founders and leaders in the retail coffee space. I've got Bob Fish on here, one of the original founders from Biggby Coffee. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks.
Absolutely. Bob, can you, just for the listeners, in case anybody doesn't know who you are, can you go ahead and tell people who you are and what you're known for?
Sure. I mean, my title in business is co-CEO, co-founder of Biggby Coffee. And Biggby Coffee started in 1995, and we franchise retail coffee shops in about 13 states. So we have about 300 locations open and operating in various parts of the United States.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's go. I really like to do the stories, Bob, right back from the beginning, because I think that matters, the origin. Talk a little bit about your youth, growing up. Where's your hometown? Siblings, family, support, any sports and interests growing up? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I might forget one or two of those, but yeah, I mean, my childhood was a little unique. I was actually born in Augsburg, Germany. My mother was German, and my father was an American. And most of my growing up years, I lived in Europe. I lived 3 years in Germany. I lived 4 years in Paris, France, and then I lived 3 years in London, England. And in between those, we lived in various places in the United States, so which included Texas, Ohio, and Michigan. But a lot of what took our family to Europe was my father worked for Ford Motor Company. And so we sort of bounced between Southeast Michigan and various Ford enterprises that were in Europe. So that my hometown is Augsburg, Germany. Which is in Bavaria.
Right.
But by the way, that did have a huge impact on me later in my life in terms of my coffee experiences. But I have a brother, John, and he grew up same as I did, lived in the United States, but now he and his family live in Berlin, Germany. And my parents are both still living, although divorced. One lives here in town with me. I live in Saugatuck, Michigan. She lives about a mile and a half away from me.
Okay.
And my father lives in Rancho Santa Fe outside San Diego in California.
Got it. Nice. So growing up, were you one of those, I'm sure you've been asked this, were you one of those entrepreneurial youth out shoveling snow or selling anything door to door that you could get your hands on?
Well, yes, I was always sort of at least entrepreneurial thinking, but my first enterprise that I can remember was our family was in Sterling Heights. We lived in an apartment building, and I would knock on people's doors to see if they would be willing to let me take out their trash for a quarter. So that's my earliest recollection, somewhere around the fourth or the fifth grade.
Great. Well, let's jump right into the business of Biggby. So in 1995, you and your co-founder, Mike McFall, had a vision. And let's just get this right out of the way. Can we address, let's do this. What was the original name and then the change, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, right. And one thing I need to clarify too, my original founding partner was Mary Roselle.
Yeah.
Who later retired. And but Michael and I are the ones that are left out of the founding members. So, but yeah, when we first opened, our full coffee shop name was Beaner's Cappuccino.
Yep.
And Beaner's, of course, referencing coffee beans and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And there were already 30 coffee shops in the greater Lansing area, independent shops, no chains at that point in time. And we're really just trying to create a name that was easy to remember. But it turns out that that was also a name that was derogatory
Sure.
towards Mexican Americans.
Sure.
And, we came up with that name at our kitchen table, didn't think much about it. I was a kid that grew up in Europe, and then, I lived in Lansing, and
Yep.
I had no idea. And we went along for a good long time with the name Beaners till about 2006. But generally we're an organization that believes in the idea of loving people.
Sure.
And, this idea of having a name that also cross-referenced, a defamating name towards a Mexican American just seemed like really the wrong thing to do. So we changed the name in 2007 to Biggby Coffee.
Sure. Was the coffee market saturated at that time, Mike? Talk to me a little bit about the 90s. Was it really saturated at that point in time?
Not really. It would have been considered the first wave, and there's many waves of the specialty coffee industry.
Sure.
So just to give it perspective, Starbucks, who started in Seattle, had only just started their first wave out, and they were just entering Chicago in 1995, and we're in no other major city at that point in time. There was a lot of independents that came up at that moment, most of which don't exist in the greater Lansing area today.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lansing area, for whatever reason, was really hot with coffee shops, more hotter than Grand Rapids and hotter than Detroit. And so we were in a very competitive landscape on the one hand in 1995. But to give a perspective, in 1995, only 5% of the coffee drinking population actually consumed specialty coffee, whereas today it's closer to 40%.
Okay.
So it was a much narrower market. We had a lot of education to do for the consumer, like what is a cappuccino? What does it mean to have an espresso? What's the difference between a cappuccino and a latte? People were like, I'll just take a cup of coffee. Thank you very much. At that time.
What do you attribute the demand, the interest in coffee in Lansing compared to those other areas?
Well, I think it was just a convergence of events. The weather in Lansing is conducive to that. One of the reasons it was so popular in Seattle is because it rained all the time. But we have a lot of cloudy days in Lansing. But sort of the overlay of the university, the capital, and healthcare. Those employers right there are what really drove the initial interest in specialty coffee. And it was really started by a few people. In other words, prior to starting Biggby Coffee, I was in the restaurant business, right? So I owned a flapjack restaurant, and I had put myself through school by working at a flapjack restaurant. And I love the restaurant business. My degree came from MSU as hospitality business.
Sure.
We're doing super fine in that. But in and about early 1994, 1993, a concept opened in East Lansing called Espresso Royale.
Okay.
And I was like, holy cow, specialty coffee in America. Can that work? But I was a kid that grew up in Europe, and so I went into this shop, and I was like, this is amazing. And really from that point forward, I tried to figure out how to sort of divest myself of that restaurant business and get into the coffee business.
Sure. Did you and your co-founders each recognize your own unique strengths right from the beginning, or is that something that more developed over time? And can you talk a little bit about that? In other words, did you find that Mike was the numbers person, and you were the kind of the face, or vice versa? How did that work?
Yeah, well, generally my roles and responsibilities in the beginning were sort of operations and marketing.
Yeah.
And Michael's were sales and accounting, although there was a lot of overlap. But we were two people that shared the same values, but certainly brought different assets to the table. And, I've never been in business without a partner, and I don't think I'd ever be in business without a partner either.
Right.
And, my only advice on that is make sure you're picking partners that where your assets, what you bring to the table, you don't lay right over each other. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
if each person can bring unique assets, there will be sort of a synergistic effect in the end.
Biggby, probably more than any company brand, of course, in Michigan, I believe, and probably one of the leading ones in the Midwest, really known for their company culture and their work in the community and your awareness of a number of different topics going on. Can you talk a little bit about why that was important to you and your co-founders right from the beginning, to have that awareness and make that kind of a, a marker for the company that you were going to form your kind of your ideals around?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, we had this mantra, which was be happy, have fun, make friends, love people, and drink great
Yeah,
coffee.
I remember.
Yeah. And, really leaned in on that. And it sort of became a marketing message in some ways. And that actually created a little bit of a risk. In other words, this journey of our culture has been a journey, and we're still on that journey and trying to get better at it
Sure.
all the time. But really, it was about 2014, 15 that we decided to double down on that. And we extracted one word out of that because we think that word also creates the other components that we used to talk about.
Okay.
That's the word love. And it became a mission of ours to make the word love as ubiquitous in business as the word profit, right? And basically just begin to care about people.
Yeah.
I sort of came out of a school of thinking where relationships with employees and consumers and vendors and so on and so forth was all transactional, and you kept an arm's length. But we decided to intentionally create a purpose that included the word love. So our purpose at Biggby Coffee is to support you in building a life you love. Where we think that will take us in the end is that we will, in fact, improve workplace culture in America. But we have focused so much time and energy around developing a curriculum inside Biggby Coffee, and now really outside of Biggby Coffee, to make the word love, and not love in a romantic sense, but just caring deeply about people and being conscious of one's own impact on them and their impact on us. That has been an extraordinary journey for us. And in terms of the community involvement has been a tenet of ours since the very beginning. And it goes like this. I mean, you own a coffee shop, you're part of a community, your community supports you, you got to support your community, period. And now that sounds a little transactional, but what we really want to do is be a beacon inside the community of support and what it looks like to support your community.
Fantastic. And it's noticed from afar, as unbiased as I can. It really is noticed, and that's, the intentionality is definitely there. It really just goes hand in hand. On that kind of that same note with intentionality, one of the things, nobody could deny is wherever there's an empty space nowadays, it looks like as if though there's a Biggby going up, a franchise.
Yeah.
When did that process really become possible for anybody to become a Biggby owner within reason? And talk about that process of how someone, if interested, can go into business with Biggby.
Yeah, right. So really, it happened early on. So, we had built the first store, we built the second store. So the first one in 1995, second one in 1997. Right. We started franchising by 1999.
Yeah.
And the reason we started franchising is people just began to start asking us, hey, how can I own one of these? Yeah. And we didn't know anything about franchising. So we went to somebody who was very successful at franchising the Lansing area at that time, and her name was Mary Ellen Sheets. and she had started Two Men in a Truck.
Sure.
And like, hey, Mary Ellen, how do we do this? And she gave us the lowdown, and we just started franchising right out the gate, really. So by the time we had hit store 3, 4, 5, those were all franchise units. Now, today we're 100% franchise. And that's really important to us, to be 100% franchise. And the reason it's important to us is actually our business model, the Biggby Coffee business model. Our customer is our owner operator, and our consumer is the customer.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And so we're wholly focused on the success, the business success of a Biggby franchisee. I mean, we are interested in helping people own their own businesses and creating lifetime wealth for their families. That's what we're up to.
Absolutely.
Besides like creating love and all kinds of stuff like that in business. So the process to become a franchisee, of course, you have to apply to become a franchisee. Yep. And a lot of those criteria have to do with availability of location. Like it's pretty hard to add another one in the greater Lansing area. But also you have to have the proper financial stability. And then what happens is you actually meet us and you find out how hippy dippy we are and how we're looking to sort of change the world and improve workplace culture. And if that's your gig and you don't opt out of that, then we want you in.
Yep. Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about this. It could be a whole podcast, but Biggby as a business, like any business, talk to me about the roadblocks you ran into in the last 2.5 years with COVID. Mm-hmm. What things did you have to overcome, and that process, even as it evolves today?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a really frightening moment in time. We're a franchise company, so if we had no locations open, we would have no revenue. So, at one moment we thought we were going to zero. The most common word that came out of COVID for business was the idea of pivot.
Yep.
And we didn't use that word. What we were able to do is basically double down on who we were already. So we already had sort of been working on for 4 or 5 years this idea that what we want to do is support you in building a life you love. So whether you're an owner operator or a consumer or their barista or a vendor, we were able to sort of turn up the dial on that. And now we had to come up with creative ways to problem solve in real time. And so there was a lot of processes and procedures that came out of that made our owner operators extraordinarily successful during COVID.
Sure.
A lot of our owner operators were up 10%, 15%, 20%. And the reason is because they're all locally owned and operated. And when you're locally owned and operated, you're not answering to somebody back at headquarters, I don't know where in the USA. What that means is you're part of the community. And so whether it was staff looking for a safe environment to work in or customers looking for a safe environment to buy coffee in, we already had that prescription in place. But the thing that was really quite remarkable is something that we created called Town Hall, where all of our owner operators would get on a Zoom call simultaneously. Yep. And we would say, okay, here's the problem. How do we solve it? It included things like we were putting up plexiglass before those were recommendations out there. We were having touchless methods payment before others discovered how to do that, only because of that sort of entrepreneurial spirit of problem solving. So rather than just having one set of brains trying to problem solve, what we had 300 operators coming up with ideas on how to problem solve, and it was just really quite exceptional during that.
Well, and that way everybody has a vested interest in it, in the answers.
That's right. Now, fantastic. I mean, other roadblocks we've hit since then, of course, we've had labor-related issues that have really hurt consistency out there for a Biggby Coffee.
Okay.
The turnover became very high after about 12, 18 months into COVID. I'm sure everybody's feeling the pressure of inflationary items out there, gas, oil, groceries, you name it. There's just so much pressure Now, not so much on the top line of the business, which is where we were worried about on COVID, but on the
Sure.
bottom line of the business. And so, we have to sharpen our pencils and figure out how to get through these inflationary pressures at this moment in time.
Bob, every founder, entrepreneur, business person has had somebody along the line. Anybody successful has had somebody who's influenced them. From a business perspective, who would you say really was your mentor as you were starting to form your business philosophies coming up through the business?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a difficult question for me to answer because I started pretty young, right? So,
Yeah,
I put myself through school. It took me 8 years to get my 4-year degree. So, but it's because I worked in the restaurant business. Started off as a
sure.
prep cook and dishwasher and worked the line cook, manager, all that kind of stuff. When I graduated, I was running a restaurant. And I didn't have a lot of time to look out and look for mentors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I would say my lifelong mentor has been my business partner, Mike McFall. I mean, a lot of people ask us, well, how does this co-CEO thing work? And I'd recommend it to anybody. You know how they say it's like lonely at the top,
Yes, sir.
and it certainly can be, but it's a lot less lonely when you've got a partner right there that is supporting you, coaching you, encouraging you. But really, I've learned so much from my business partner, Mike McFall.
If you could give one piece of advice to anybody founding or starting a business, practical, everyday advice, what would you tell them?
Can I give two pieces?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, the first one is focus. You just have to have an extraordinary amount of focus when you go into business, and you can't be chasing after every squirrel.
Yes, sir.
So that maybe that goes without saying, but you really need that. But one of my favorite things, and it was written in a book that my business partner Mike McFall wrote called Grind. My favorite thing is to make sure to do due diligence on yourself, right? So many times they talk about building a business plan, you got to do your due diligence and so on and so forth, and it's all external. But the person that's going to be really put to the test is you. And you have to run a due diligence on yourself and make sure that you've got, the stamina, the courage, the focus, support of your family or your spouse and so on. But spending that time right there up front is probably one of the most important things you can do.
Awesome. I always do this with every guest. I like to give some quick hitters at the end. And I like to just kind of see what comes out as soon as you hear the initial question here. Tell me, does Bob Fish like to travel, even within the state of Michigan?
Yes, I love travel.
Awesome.
My wife and I have a life goal of getting to 140 countries.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But
Love
in
that.
the state of Michigan, my favorite place to go is Mackinac Island. I got married there. And not at the Grand. Everybody says at the Grand, and I'm like, no, not at the Grand, at Stonecliff, and that place just is very near and dear to my heart.
Is Bob Fish more of a night owl or a morning person?
I'm a morning person all the way. I get more done in the first 3 hours of the day than most people get done all day.
Same here. Right. Same here. What does Bob Fish like to do, just even on a weekday evening for fun, or even on the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I do I just find it really highly restorative. So I hike, walk, really, but I go 6, 7, 8 miles a day, really, and it just provides a lot of clarity. And for me, it's about spending time in nature. In our indoor world, everything is perpendicular, angular, and so on. In nature, it is chaotic. The wind's blowing, the water's churning, the trees are growing in every direction. Color makes no sense, but yet our brains find that very, very soothing. And it's just a great way to process information.
Perfect. Favorite business book, or just book in general, maybe an author, but let's go with this for a podcast, business book or podcast that you enjoy listening to.
Yeah, I mean, again, and I don't mean to make this an ad for my business partner, but Mike McFall has a book. It's called Grind.
Yeah.
No bullshit approach to your business. And it's really
Love
about getting your business from concept to the first dollar of profit. And it's amazing.
Perfect. Do you have a favorite app on your phone?
Yeah. My favorite app is Duolingo. And I'm in the process of learning Spanish. You know, we have been on a mission of farm direct, you know, making all of our coffee purchases farm direct and developing relationships directly with farmers, eliminating brokers and all that kind of stuff. So many of our farms are in Central and South America. And, you know, I never learned Spanish. So Duolingo is a charm. I mean, it really works.
Bob, we have a second. Let me ask you about this. And this is really off script, and I hope you don't mind me asking it. Big controversy nowadays with whether a 17-year to 18-year-old graduate from high school needs to go to college. And I don't want to step on any toes here, but if they have a vision and I know what I would tell my own children, but it's always nice to get leaders' philosophies on this as well, especially in business. What is your point of view if a student has an opportunity or a young person has an opportunity out there to go into a trade, to go into technology, and they have the skills, they have the interest? What is your viewpoint on that? You know, if you want to become a doctor, of course, or a lawyer, you have to go to college to get to get your JD, to get your MD, or otherwise. But what about, you know, your point of view on, you know, becoming an electrician or a plumber or otherwise? That's a big, you know, talking point nowadays. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, it's multidimensional for me.
Sure.
For one, you know, the one thing I want to say about an education, it is one thing that nobody can ever take away from you. So once you have it, it's yours, right?
Yep.
And nobody can take that away from you.
Absolutely.
In the trades, frankly, electrician, plumber, mason, doesn't really matter, welder, you have to go to school too.
Yeah, you do.
And then you got to do this apprenticeship and all that. So no matter what, you got to go to school somehow in order to have something that is unique and marketable out there.
Sure.
But let me close this particular topic by saying that my own son, I offered him all of this college money to not go to college, right? He wanted to pursue music, and I'm like, just go pursue music. I'll give you the money I was going to give you for college. Go do that. Now, he wouldn't do it, and he insisted on going to school. But here's the thing about entrepreneurialism: a lot of being successful in business is just getting started, right? Yep. And then iterate, reiterate. And since you're just in these cycles of iterations of hopefully getting better, right, improving all the time,
yes, sir.
The sooner you get started, the better it'll be for you.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Bob, this has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you on social media or otherwise?
Sure. Best places are Facebook and LinkedIn, both of those. And, you know, other people don't manage that for me. I actually still manage my own social media. You can type in the words Bob Fish, Robert Fish, or Biggby Bob, and you should be able to find me on either one of those. Well,
I love you on not Facebook, but on LinkedIn. And that's where I really kind of, you know, did a little bit of digging on you and your point of views on things. And it's, you know, a lot of people don't realize LinkedIn's a valuable tool, especially if you want to find out good business perspectives and specific information about individuals in business. So great, Bob, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck to you and Biggby.
Right on.